Okay. Looks like everybody got back in that wanted to be. Is that right? So it is 1 p.m. on Wednesday, July 15th, 2026. This is a hearing conducted by the Land Use Review Board on the adopted Rutland Regional Plan. My name is Janet Hurley. I'm the chair, and I'm going to ask board members to introduce themselves. Sarah?
Sarah Hyde, good afternoon.
Alex?
Alex Weinhagen, hello everyone.
Brooke?
Brooke Dingeldine, good afternoon.
Thank you. And that is 4 of us. Kirsten is not serving on this particular final review. Can we go around the room and have people say who they are?
Sure.
I'm Stephanie Berg, staff with the Rutland Regional Planning Commission.
Devin Erie, Executive Director with the Rutland Regional Planning Commission.
Larry Crisell, I'm the Commissioner from Mendon on the RRPC.
Luke Alexander, I'm the Assistant Zoning Administrator for Rutland City.
Mary Lee Harris, Select Board Castleton.
Rob Steele, Select Board Castleton.
Thank you. And we have online, if anybody, Brad, would you like to introduce yourself?
He's trying to speak.
Yeah, he just unmuted himself. But while we're waiting for Brad, Kate, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate McCarthy. I'm with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and we'll be sitting in your chairs a week from now. So here to learn and also to learn about our fellow RPCs. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Brad, are you able to speak?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. So I had a headphone problem. Sorry. Brad Turner, taxpayer in Castleton.
Okay, thank you, Brad. And I saw Thomas come in, but he has since left. So we will catch him later. So as I said, this is a hearing on the Rutland Regional Plan. The Land Use Review Board, via Act 181 of 2024, is tasked with approving all 11 regional planning commissions in the state, or regional plans in the state. And it requires a 2-step process. And the first step is a 60-day pre-application review. Rutland did that last year. And it got feedback from us, and then it went back to its region and its municipalities and made some changes, and then went through the hearing process for adopting. And it adopted the plan, Devin, on what date?
May 19th.
May 19th. And then submitted to the Land Use Review Board for a final determination of compliance. So this is a more formal proceeding than the pre-application phase, where we hold a public hearing. This public hearing, we take comments and information at the hearing. The board will decide toward the end of this hearing whether it has enough information to make that final determination of compliance. And it will close the hearing if it feels it has all the information it needs. So today we are, oh, and Thomas is back. Thomas, will you introduce yourself?
I'm Thomas Weiss. I'm from Montpelier, and I was here at the pre-application meeting to see what's going on. So I will be a little more prepared for when my regional planning commission, which I'm not a member of, but Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, goes through this procedure in maybe 2 months. We've got our pre-application meeting. I think it's scheduled, but I'm not sure exactly.
It is just got scheduled. So
Janet?
So yeah.
You have a couple other people that have joined online if you're still doing introductions.
Oh, yes. Annette can you introduce yourself?
Hello, this is Annette Smith from Danby.
Thank you, Annette, and Faith.
Hi, everyone. I'm Faith Dahl. I work with the Agency of Transportation. I'm the planning coordinator for the Rutland region.
Thank you, Faith. So we, as part of this process, are obligated to respond to any objectors to the adoption of the plan. We did not receive any objectors for the Rutland Regional Plan. So the board will not be addressing particular objections from people who applied as objectors. It doesn't mean that the board isn't going to hear from the public as we do this process. So first today, however, we're going to let the Regional Planning Commission present its adopted plan. Then we are going to allow board members to ask questions, and then we will open it up to all other participants to make comments or ask questions. We will also give the commission, the Rutland Regional Commission, time to respond to any comments in that comment period. So,
Janet?
yes.
Excuse me, this is Brooke. I think you missed Stephanie Bork.
Nope, she was our first person introduced.
She's here in the room.
She's in the room.
Oh, gotcha. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Wanted to make sure.
That's okay. Thanks. Thanks for looking out. It's hard to. It's helpful to have your eyes on this, everybody. So thanks. So unless there are questions about the process, are there any questions about the process? I guess I should say that what the board is doing is it's reviewing the plan for compliance with certain sections of statute, in particular in Title 24 BSA 4348 and 4348A, and also for Tier 1B requests, we are looking at Title 10, Section 6033. So, and for the Tier 1B requests, the commission has proposed 7 municipalities for Tier 1B status, and we will be hopefully addressing those as we proceed here. So with that, Devin and Stephanie, would you like to take over for a little bit?
Sure. Thank you so much, Janet. So again, I'm Stephanie Burke with the Regional Planning Commission, and on behalf of our organization, I'll be providing the overview of our adopted regional plan. Set up screen sharing. Okay, so we're here today, as I said, to provide an overview of the 2026 Rutland Regional Plan that has been adopted by our board, and we're here today at the Adopted Plan Land Use Review Board hearing. So in terms of what I'll cover today for an overview, I'm going to give you a brief recap of our entire planning process and highlighting key milestones in the development of this plan, including our engagement strategy. I'll then provide an overview of the plan itself and its companion piece, the Regional Future Land Use Map, mainly focusing on a summary of the plan's purpose and use. And then provide a brief recap of our public hearing process in terms of feedback we received during the first and final hearings. So in terms of the planning process, we started this back in March of 2023 with a kickoff internally in our organization. This plan update represents a full rewrite from our 2018 plan. So we had a considerable amount of work to do during the kickoff phase. We worked with the Vermont Housing Finance Authority to do a housing needs assessment for the Rutland region. That was done in 2023. We developed our engagement strategy with support from an outside consultant. And we kicked everything off with our staff in October of 23 at a staff retreat where we really kind of solidified the vision for this plan. We then, launched into the drafting phase of the process, which took us from November of 23 to August of 2025. We went through several iterations of drafting. And it was during this phase that we really launched into our engagement strategy to make sure that we were connecting with our region throughout the planning process and not just at the end in the final hearing stages. So we, our learn and assess first phase of engagement was conducted between January and April of 2024. And through that, we gained a shared understanding of baseline conditions along with strengths, assets, and challenges in the region. We took that information, produced a working draft of the plan that had draft priorities mapped out. And during the second phase of engagement between September and November of 2024, we shared those in our engagement work, and the outcome of that being a validation from the region that our plan's policies were at least on target. We used that information to prepare a final draft for the plan and entered into our third and final phase of engagement, which we called alignment. And that was conducted between April and June of 2025. The outcome being a plan and regional future land use map that we felt reflected a shared vision for community economic development that was guided by areas designated for growth and conservation based on existing environmental, infrastructure, and community factors. I share this information with everyone today to just demonstrate, the length of time it has taken our office to prepare this plan and the level of effort we took to try at meaningful milestones during the process to engage with our region to make sure that we were, developing a plan that we felt reflected a shared vision. So with the culmination of the drafting phase was the pre-application draft that Janet referred to earlier. That was submitted to the Land Use Review Board in September of 2025, and that really was crossing the threshold from the drafting phase into the adoption phase. The adoption process, as you can see from this slide's bullets, is a multi-step process, including a pre-application review by the Land Use Review Board, as well as the Public Service Department in our case. And based on the pre-application findings from the Land Use Review Board, we had additional public information hearings to convey back to the region what those findings were and how they impacted our planning. We incorporated all of the findings from the Land Use Review Board into a final draft of our plan that was presented to the public at our first public hearing in the adoption process in March of 2026. We then followed that up with 3 supplemental public meetings around the region to make sure that we were providing ample opportunity for folks to participate in that process. In the event they weren't able to attend a meeting on March 17th here at our office. We took feedback from all of that and presented the results at the final public hearing where the plan was adopted on May 19th. Information about the engagement process and the final report documenting all of the input and methods used is available on the project landing page, which has been up since day one. It's that rutlandrpc.org/plan 2026 website. So moving on to kind of an overview of the purpose and use of the plan. The plan itself and the regional future land use map are available on that project landing page. But the Rutland Regional Plan, it's a comprehensive 8-year plan to guide and accomplish coordinated and efficient community economic development that balances economic development with social, cultural, and environmental priorities. So this plan's lifespan will be from 2026 to 2034. And it's intended to help shape the pattern, design, and function of communities to best meet our future needs over that time frame. And at the center of this effort is an analysis of present and future land uses and identifying areas for growth and conservation. I like to think of that being what distinguishes a community economic development planning tool from other types of community economic development planning tools. This is really where regional planning commissions, focus lies. So the plan itself serves a variety of users. In terms of the citizens and landowners in the region, it can be an educational and reference document, providing essential information about the area and outlining a vision for the future. For municipal officials, it offers them guidance for developing town plans and supporting local initiatives such as transportation and economic development goals. So it was nice to see Faith here today. Business and developers can refer to the plan to gather pertinent information about the Rutland region and identify suitable locations for projects and create business plans. State agencies with programs or actions that impact land use must participate in a planning process to ensure alignment with the regional plan. And then finally, Act 250 and Section 248 development review. So as part of their application review for major subdivision and development projects seeking an Act 250 permit, the Act 250 district environmental commissioners must determine whether the project aligns with the goals and policies of the regional plan. Similarly, the Vermont Public Utility Commission must also evaluate in its application review for electrical or gas transmission or generation projects seeking a certificate of public good, whether the project would unduly disrupt the orderly development of the Rutland region as outlined in the regional plan. And then finally, as a statutory party to all Act 250 and Section 248 applications in the Rutland region, the Rutland Regional Planning Commission's Board of Commissioners will conduct development reviews in accordance with its adopted application review policy. And the commissioners review proposed developments for their conformance with the goals and policies of the regional plan, their potential for substantial regional impact, and orderly development in the Rutland region. So the companion piece to the plan that I've mentioned, the Regional Future Land Use Map, really was developed using a standardized statewide methodology that was provided by BAPTA with input from our municipalities. And it's a planning tool that uses 11 new state-defined land use categories to show areas intended for growth, conservation, and other uses based on infrastructure, development patterns, and community input. Those 11 land use categories are presented here. I'm not going into detail today. We've covered that material in previous public meetings. But the punchline being that the regional future land use map also identifies areas that are eligible for state designation programs and Tier 1 Act 250 exemption. The regional future land use map does not regulate land use or change local zoning. Of the 11 land use categories, these are the ones that represent areas that are designated for what we would consider higher density growth. And the first 4, downtown centers, village centers, planned growth areas, and village areas, are the land use categories which become eligible for Tier 1 Act 250 exemptions. So in our region, there ended up being 12 towns with a Tier 1B eligibility. And those were Brandon, Castleton, Fairhaven, Killington, Mendon, Paulet, Poultney, Proctor, Rutland City, Shrewsbury, Wallingford, and West Rutland. There were 2 towns in our region that weren't quite ready to fulfill all of the eligibility criteria by the time our plan was adopted, but they will likely be seeking Tier 1B approval in the future, and those were Benson and Pittsford. So this is just a slide kind of showing the distribution of the Tier 1B areas that we are seeking approval for with our regional plan application to the LRRB. So we've got 7 municipalities: Brandon, Fairhaven, Killington, Mendon, Poultney, Proctor, and West Rutland. And you can see on this slide which of the 4 eligible land use categories are located in each of the towns. So the 3 other land use categories that we would consider are areas that are more appropriate for lower density growth or conservation purposes, round out the categories that you'll find mapped in the Rutland Regional Future Land Use Map, as well as some recognition of historic hamlets. So in terms of our adoption process, I just wanted to provide a quick summary of our public hearings. There were no substantive changes made to the plan itself after the first public hearing held on March 17th of 2026. The changes that were made were to the proposed regional future land use map, and those were made in response to feedback from our municipalities. The changes were presented at the second public hearing on May 19th of 2026. And the result, in our opinion, is a more regionally consistent map with larger planned growth areas and eligible communities, and an increase in the size of rural, agricultural, and forestry, as well as the rural general land use categories. We felt that these updates better reflected the need for more lower density, context sensitive development in our rural areas. And the final regional future land use map supports long-term growth. It's consistent with the statutory planning framework and the VAPTA methodology. And it's intended to provide the greatest potential for housing and economic development of all scales and appropriate locations across the region. So in terms of our next steps, we're here today at the Land Use Review Board's adopted plan public hearing. I'm sure Janet will speak to this at some point, but within 15 days of this hearing, the LRRB will be issuing their determination of plan compliance. Back in May, on the 21st, we also submitted the plan to the Public Service Department because with this update, we're seeking determination of enhanced energy planning, a determination of compliance for an enhanced energy plan. And we're expecting sometime around the 20th of July to be receiving a determination of plan compliance from the Public Service Department. And once we have those 2 determinations in place and our plan has, received the approval of both the Land Use Review Board and the PSD, we plan to then be showcasing the approved plan around the region and begin launching into our plan for implementing all the good things that we've said we're going to do with the plan. So again, if you have more information about the plan itself or the map, you can find that at the rutlandrpc.org/plan 2026 website.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Do you have any other presentation information you want to provide? All right, we can launch into questions.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to let board members ask questions. And first I'll ask board members if it's okay if I start. Brooke's nodding, 2 thumbs up. Okay, so I'll start. So Stephanie spoke to differences between the plan, their draft plan, and their first public hearing plan and their final plan. I'd like to focus on differences between the pre-application draft plan that you presented to the Land Use Review Board last year and the final plan. So, as I explained earlier, the Land Use Review Board provided a written pre-application response to the Regional Planning Commission, where we made preliminary assessments as to whether the plan appeared to meet statutory standards. And so some of the comments that we had were about the future land use map, maybe half of them. And then we had a number of comments for different elements of the plan or different goals that we saw may need a little tweaking. So first of all, maybe I'll go in a little bit of an order here in the way that we presented it in our response. But one requested revision that we had was providing more inventory and context for historical landscapes, districts, and structures to meet the 4302 C5D goal on cultural resources in particular. I reviewed the final plan, the adopted plan, and I felt that it did meet the statutory standards. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say how you felt that your plan did that.
Yeah, this was a chapter that we gave much more attention to than previous regional plan versions. And the idea was to really blow this out to more of a cultural resources chapter than just the specific provisions and statute, to give a better sort of overview and paint a picture of what the assets are in our region. So we've tried to use the core data sets to build that framework and narrative around what exists in Rutland County. So I feel like we probably gave this more airtime and space in our plan than what is maybe even required, but we felt like it was a really nice complement to these really like technical and structural elements that add to the plan. This really talks more about what is Rutland County, like what makes this place great. And so I think that was communicated well in that chapter.
Thanks. Similarly, we thought that there were two statutory requirements, one being to identify significant natural communities, natural resources, and fragile areas. And those have specific meanings. And I noticed that you did revise your plan and you specifically addressed those. Do you want to describe that, or?
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, these have clear definitions based on sort of A&R regulations or considerations. So it was much more of a direct crosswalk between this is missing, so add it in. So it's pretty self-explanatory overall. There, surprisingly, in our research, there weren't nearly as many as we thought there would be. Given our there's one.
There's one. You identified one fragile area, the Gifford Wood area as fragile area, and then you added a map that shows significant natural communities.
And we thought it was better visualized as a map versus a bullet list to give context to where these things are.
So the next piece, and I think this was our most substantive request of you on the goals and elements part, and that is that we didn't see that you provided the now newly required environmental benefits and burdens analysis. And you have now added that into an appendix, and it's fleshed out there. It looks very comprehensive, and I wonder if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Do you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
You should probably take
that. So what Janet's referring to is a new provision that requires regional planning commissions to evaluate environmental benefits and burdens for populations throughout the region and looking at very specific criteria to evaluate against. We originally had not included this in the first draft because we felt as though by baking in equity analysis in consideration into each chapter of the plan, we had fulfilled that requirement. However, the requirement really is much more technical in nature and requires some spatial analysis of actual data to determine whether groups really within the region are impacted negatively or positively by certain environmental conditions. Surprisingly, we found that there really wasn't a really big disparate impact between the underserved populations versus not. It was a really nice analysis in terms of our own planning effort just to make these considerations. So we did work with some RPC counterparts that had paved the way and identified some potential frameworks to consider, because the statute is really broad overall. So it doesn't give you like a process by which to do this. So we really were starting from scratch. So many of the regional planning commissions have utilized a similar framework to compare against. And that is good because the whole point of Act 181 and this effort is to try to create some consistency. So, generally speaking, there's not a clear burden in the Rutland region based on any one group or area overall.
I'll just clarify or add that the environmental justice law defines what are called environmental justice focused populations. And it requires that you look at census tracts and assess whether 3 populations meet certain levels to be considered for that census tract to be considered an environmental justice focused population. And so in your appendix, you did that, you provided a map showing those census tracts. And that was the basis of that geographic analysis that you.
Yeah, thanks for adding
conducted.
that. That's important context. Yeah.
Okay. We made some advisory recommendations, some of which you took us up on. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
Just thought I'd chime in on the same topic rather than having each board member have to, go through the same items. So
Sure, yeah.
in the pre-application response letter, with regard to goal 15 and the environmental benefits and burdens analysis, I'm like you, Janet, I was appreciative of the new appendix in the plan and was interested to see the analysis, and also happy to see that what the RPC did in the plan chapters is still relevant to this goal, even if the quantitative analysis in the appendix didn't show any disproportionate benefits and burdens with regard to the environmental justice focused populations. So I thought that was all good. But one of the comments we made was we asked to include a summary of engagement strategies focused on disadvantaged groups and how the RPC has reached or will reach those populations. And I wonder, Devin, Stephanie, if you could talk about that.
Yeah. So I think our intention was to sort of have this be expressed in our public engagement summary report overall, and that we certainly did engage with priority populations and underserved populations, but we also tried to not tokenize or sort of focus solely on those populations. And we actually, at several points, sort of brought it back to a broader context, but still including those voices and community-based organizations and groups that represent those communities. So I think we demonstrated pretty well in that summary report how we did that. Why we didn't include it in this full report is we didn't feel like it would do it justice by having a little 1 paragraph essay versus this 200-page supplement. We didn't want to diminish the whole value of that effort by trying to summarize it and piece it down into a very diluted version. So, Alex, I think we saw the tea leaves before this law was even written and embedded that into our approach from the beginning. I think that is well documented in this engagement report.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the strategy that was developed came from a point of ensuring that all the methods we employed would reach all of the populations, so that everyone had an opportunity to bring a voice to the table.
Thank you, Stephanie. I just remembered that we should be saying our names before we speak so that our recording can establish who is speaking. So I'm Janet Hurley. I should have said that before I stated that, but that was Stephanie just previous to me and Devin from the RPC answering Alex's questions. People online don't need to do that because it knows who they are, but those of us in the room should do that. Thank you.
Janet, can I follow up on that question?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for speaking to that, Devin and Stephanie. The summary report of the report of the public engagement strategy. I'm just trying to find it. I'm embarrassed to say that I'm not sure which document you're referring to.
So the way we handled it in the plan was to provide a link for the engagement report to the project landing page. So it's at rutlandrpc.org/plan 2026. And there should be a link right at the top for the engagement report.
And I'll just report that I followed that link from the plan, and I did look at it and did assess the whole. The link works. Okay. And I just got shut out of my computer. I'm trying to get back in. Any other board comments on environmental justice, focused population, disparate analysis? No.
I think it's important. I'd like to just add one more comment for context. This is more for just awareness for the members of the LRB than anything. Sorry, Devin speaking. And that is, we found it extremely challenging to break through and gain trust and get party populations to engage in every sector. And that really, I think, demonstrates that these folks are being tapped on many different levels from many different groups. And I think, the capacity strains are significant. And then, of course, sort of coming out of the woodwork to do this when we haven't had traditional longstanding relationships is hard. And I think it's important to recognize that when you guys are doing your evaluation, to understand that like sometimes the best laid plans do not bear fruit, and that is okay because the attempt is still there. And what really should be focused on is like, how will we do this in the future, and not just these sort of tokenized one-off, like we checked the box, you gave your input, thank you, goodbye. So more substantive, long-term relationship building. And I think about that like engagement on the spectrum of like inform to empower, and we're still very much on the low end of that scale. So it's aspirational. I think it's changed the way we do things, but there's still a lot more to go.
And this is Stephanie. Go ahead, just pop in here. And when we developed our engagement strategy and had those 3 different phases, we found it was challenging to package this information in a way that would be accessible. regional planning topics are very broad. Community economic development, it covers a huge spectrum of material. And so sometimes the sheer volume and the complexity of the content created challenges, you know, so we spent a lot of effort trying to identify methods that would help make the information itself also accessible. So.
And this is Janet. I just wanted to reflect on what Devin was just saying, that kind of engagement, in quotes, can be extractive and burdensome in its own. And so, you know, you don't want to burden people who you have already identified as overburdened.
Literally.
So, so I think the rest, you know, that whole thematic thread throughout the plan is really important. And I think, you know, this is a new requirement for regional plans, and I think it will bear fruit for you. And so we had noted you were our first pre-application. So you were sort of our guinea pigs, and we had requested that you do some revisions to address the effects of development in areas that do become Tier 1B and Tier 1A in terms of traffic impacts. You know, I'm not sure how much that is a requirement. So we've sort of been giving this consistently across our pre-application responses, but can you discuss how you think this plan addresses the traffic impacts of growth?
Yeah, so, you know, we had some follow-up discussions with you and your group about, you know, what was a requirement versus not, and sort of considering this specific comment. So, you know, our approach to the transportation chapter was not to try to isolate any one mode, but really think about this comprehensively as a multimodal network. And, you know, generally speaking, that our yeah, so that was going to be exactly where I went, that we saw this more as developing those alternative modes more than considering future traffic congestion, because quite frankly, our roads are built to handle a higher rate of congestion than we currently experience now. So we have space to make this change. And I think it was much more of a consideration of what is the holistic view of transportation planning, regardless of any one specific development or not. And I think that came through pretty well on sort of like choice and developing choices for commuters.
Multimodal.
Yeah, multimodal.
Bike, walk,
transit. Yeah, transit was a big
and
rail as well in aviation.
This is Janet. Before I go on, do other board? Oh, Sarah, you do. Go ahead on this topic.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I think that's part of what the concern was. It was raised sort of as we're going through this transition period where VTrans has had a role typically in some of these larger developments, and now with the tier ones might not have that role in terms of trying to make sure equitable impacts as we look at regions and developments that are denser in one area and the impacts of the other, and the ability to ensure that as we have these tier ones, which are exempt from Act 250 and perhaps VTrans purview and ability to comment, is that a regional entity or a municipality has the ability to try and have those conversations around impacts and ensuring that there is a sort of more methodical approach to it, so that you don't have one community, decide to have a larger project that has impacts on another community without that sort of larger dialogue. So I think that was the other part of it too, and, just would love to hear a couple thoughts on that.
Yeah, I know that was a comment and a consideration that the LURB had made, was that is there sort of a way in which regional planning commissions could support municipalities in that review. And we did not include that as a policy or action in this final draft, mainly because that in our mind was sort of a little bit of an by request that will be made by a municipality essentially. So, again, sort of thinking much more about connecting it back to the plan and the elements within the plan, thinking about multimodal networks. I think we do a good job in our policies and actions specifically of identifying the ways in which we would assist municipalities in preparing for those types of developments, such as identifying gaps in the active transportation networks, assisting with municipal transportation asset, and capital planning. So, yeah, I think we try to look at this a little bit more in the context of the work that we do day to day with municipalities versus sort of a more one-off embedding into a municipal project review framework. So I don't know if that answers exactly what you're looking for, Sarah, but that's where we ended. That's where we landed.
Okay. Any follow-up on that, Sarah?
No, I'll wait, and I don't know if anybody else has anything on this. So I guess my only follow-up would be, could a traffic impact rise to the level of being a significant regional impact? Where even though there isn't the Act 250 process, the RPC, even without request, would insert itself in assisting dialogue?
Yeah, so again, that was not an explicit policy or action in this context of the regional plan, but I would contend, Sarah, that we already do this now. So to me, this is more of a routine programmatic effort where there are many instances where development in our region may have a significant impact on the transportation network, but does not meet the Act 250 threshold, and we're still involved in that effort. So, I think this is just like baked into our day-to-day planning efforts already in project development and review at the RPC. So I don't see how the Act 20D1, Act 250 exemptions will change any of that work that way. And we have not considered and have not been asked to have any sort of formality to that review in a local development review process.
Perfect. That was the information I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Janet. Okay to move on? Board members? Yes. So the board asked in the pre-application response for the commission to consider more discussion about how it would meet 85% affordable housing target. And I think my rereading, I think you do provide a lot of discussion of that, but would you like to comment on that in particular? 85% of your regional housing targets,
Yeah.
are proposed to be affordable.
Sure. I remember there being a bit of sticker shock reaction from the board when we first presented that level of affordable units required. But I think, well, yeah, all housing discussions in this plan are aspirational and do not have any sort of regulatory authority. I think what we tried to do in this housing chapter, which I think really shows throughout, is that we didn't necessarily just blindly accept state level targets or other sort of metrics that really didn't fit the Rutland region. So by which I mean 85% of homes being affordable considers the very real economic context of Rutland region, which is we have a very low MHI and the rate of increase in housing unit costs versus our incomes are very much mismatched. So I think we considered what the actual need was, whether that can be built or not at scale, it remains to be seen. There's so many macroeconomic forces involved with that. But I think that's why we chose a sort of alternative housing target methodology. And that's why we propose this higher rate of affordable units, because that is in actuality what people need to be able to live in Rutland County. So I think it's just very context sensitive that way.
We've heard that from other RPCs in their pre-applications.
I'm not surprised.
Too.
Yeah.
Related to that, we asked that you discuss why you chose to not use the targets from the statewide housing needs assessment and instead use your specific the 2023 plan that Stephanie referred to. And I found on page 185 of the adopted plan that you actually do extensively discuss why you did that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you guys made that request because I think it is necessary for us to explain a deviation from what is largely considered an acceptable statewide assessment.
Right. And you made a case for not using that statewide assessment and why, and you showed data in terms of your demographic trend not being anywhere near what the statewide needs assessment assumed for the entire state.
Yep.
Okay.
Alex does have a
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to concur with that last statement regarding our requested revision about more discussion of justification for the proposed housing targets. Totally agree that the revised housing chapter makes a good case, and it was much clearer to me when I read that why you were using the alternate targets. But I wanted to go back to the 85% of new housing as affordable. Devin, it sounds like you're making the case of why that's necessary. Is it still in the plan? I looked and didn't see the number and couldn't remember if I was just missing it in an appendix or is that 85% number not expressly noted in the plan anymore?
I think it is. Yeah, so it's on page 192. Second paragraph towards the bottom. As a result, to meet the region's housing target, 85% of new units need to be affordable to lower and moderate income Rutland County households defined as those earning up to 120% of county AMI.
Great, thanks for cluing me into where it was that I missed.
Yeah, easy to miss. It's it's a big plan.
And AMI is area median income, or annual median income for the county, for people who might want to know. So I'm ready to move on to the future land use map if board members are their board members. Sarah.
I have a housing question. It's related to the future land use map regarding some of the changes. And so Janet, I'll defer to you. Some of the changes made in terms of reducing village area and if how that impacted meeting the housing targets, but perhaps that's best reserved to the future land use map discussion.
Go ahead.
I can address that if
Yeah.
you'd like, Sarah. Interestingly enough, when it all shook out at the end of the day, we actually had about a net neutral change in the um, growth fluid or our core four, with a very big caveat about Pittsford, right? This is a sort of temporary holding of a rural general because of their expired town plan, when really we will see them and Benson as planned growth areas and village centers. So in terms of area, it was about the same. What we ended up doing though, and what you probably saw as a revision between the pre-application draft and the final, was a really small recalculation of our housing target by growth area. We did shift it slightly away from being so concentrated in those growth areas. And I want to say we landed on 70-30 in the plan, growth area to rural area, where I believe initially it was 90-10.
Yeah.
And I think what we did was we did like some actual calculations based on available land area and proposed new housing developments as to whether these new developments fit within those core four categories. And we found, wow, it's actually closer to 70 than the original 90% in that sort of separation between rural and growth categories.
Thank you, Devin. This is Janet. So the future land use map, the versions that we saw, the version that we saw at the pre-application phase and the version that we see in the adopted plan are very different. And some of those differences, I think, were in line with some of the feedback that we gave as a board, whether you did it because we gave that feedback or whether you saw that you wanted to make those changes anyway, doesn't really matter. But
right.
And so I'd like to sort of break it down a little bit. And first, and maybe easiest, can you talk about your rethinking of the 3 rural categories?
Yeah, those are largely what changed the most. You know, our growth areas have been fairly the same, along with recreation-based resources, enterprise, and the other sort of subcategories. We obviously had a very unique approach of the pre-application, where we tried to use, you know, this what was Staying Connected initiative, or those what is the name? It doesn't matter. Some of the sort of A&R guidelines around like the buffers around buildings. So we tried to do this sort of unique little circular thing, but really at the end of the day, when we decided, hey, it really is best to go largely on the parcel based level of mapping, it threw that out, right? So we kind of had a really strong rebound between the first public hearing and the pre-application to really push the rural categories much closer to the Staying Connected initiative and our sort of high priority forest blocks and wildlife corridors. But that invoked a really strong response from our towns, who saw a massive conversion from rural general and agroforestry to rural conservation. And while we know that in the regulatory sense, it doesn't mean anything between these categories, I think landowners were rightfully concerned that their land was mapped as conservation when it really shouldn't be. We are challenged with the fact that 75% of our region is sort of in these high priority categories of forests and wildlife connectors. So we wanted to pay homage to the fact that those resources exist, but not give an impression to our commissioners and municipal partners and landowners that we're sort of brushing their land and as this conservation resource. So when we went back to the final version and made revisions, we said, you know, let's just really focus primarily on the methodology and not keep sort of making these customized revisions based on like our unique features in the region, which I think resulted in the best case scenario where in our mind, rural conservation is laid out where we know there's conservation easements and blocks of state and federal land. And then for rural forestry and ag and forestry in particular, we feel as though there is a strong conservation value to those categories. And so it fulfills that initial requirement that, hey, we want to acknowledge these conservation resources within the region. So by converting them back to rural ag and forestry, we felt like we finally struck that balance where landowners in the region are happy to see their land mapped as something that's more representative and flexible. And when we gave them the underpinnings behind, because several folks were like, well, why now is it in rural ag and forestry? I'm not a farmer, you know, I don't have a forestry lot. We explained why we're doing this based on the sort of percentages of land coverage in certain areas based on the UVM land cover data and sort of identified mapping resources. So I think it struck that really nice balance of like giving landowners the recognition that this is not conservation and they want to maintain local control, context sensitive, low density development potential with the fact that these resources do exist. And when we're thinking about the 30 by 30, 55 by 50, that's still in a planning effort demonstrated through those categories. And then obviously rural general covers the rest, right? And that was a smaller percentage of the pie. But as you can see, it generally is where you would expect, sort of along these corridors and smaller parcels that wouldn't have the same natural resources that we're seeing in the bigger parcels or other two categories.
This is Stephanie. I'm just going to jump on to that. I think we did a really good job in the description of regional blue map changes that accompanied the public notice for our final hearing. Because we wanted to make sure that we were very clear about
why and what it means.
Why, like, there was a very clear explanation of the changes that were made to that map after the first public hearing. And we provided a description by land use category. And I think the way we described the changes in the 3 rural categories really helped explain what the change was and what that land use category now supports.
This is Janet. I'm wondering, did you submit that to us? I'm just trying to see if it's part of what was exhibited. Probably
not. It would have been sent to all.
Yeah, you would have gotten it when you received the notice.
Oh,
yeah.
So, okay. Okay, thank you. Alex?
Yes, so with regard to the future land use area mapping and the categories and the prior conversation about the housing chapter, you were talking about 70% of the housing target for 2040 being in the areas planned for growth and 30% in the rural areas. Did you do any further breakdown of that 30% within the rural categories, rural general versus rural ag forest versus rural conservation, or no?
No, we did not. And primarily because we're trying to honor the fact that these categories are meant to be flexible in that our plan really states very clearly that we do not want to limit context sensitive development in any land use category. Obviously, noting the fact that our conservation land use categories are unlikely to yield very little, if any, new units just by their nature and their ownership, correct? But between the rural general and rural ag and forestry, I think we're trying to maintain that flexibility, that both it's less about the trying to identify, which I think tends to be a fool's errand, where future housing will go in a growth category or in a rural category versus the underpinning tenets of good rural development, which low density, context sensitive, and if the density does increase, trying to support a clustered housing model where appropriate.
Gotcha. Yeah, that all makes sense to me. I appreciate the fact that the housing target, which again is just a target, not a mandate, expressly indicates a reasonable percentage or a significant percentage to the rural parts of your region, even if it's not, there isn't specificity as to which type of category within the rural class. I think that's really important for Vermonters to understand that as planners, we are not turning off rural Vermont to housing, that a lot of housing already exists there, and there will be more, even if we are doing our best to follow the state's guidelines and policies with regard to smart growth in our planned growth areas. So I think that's really smart. I was just curious about the breakdown because different regions are doing it differently, and some of them have allocated some of the targets to rural general and rural ag forest. And you guys didn't. That's fine. My other comment was just going to be on our requested revisions at the very beginning of the future land use map of our response letter with regard to boundary anomalies and future land use area sort of granularity and slivers. And I just wanted to say thank you and give you 2 thumbs up. I think you really were responsive to that request, and you nailed it in my mind. I think the mapping is much better, and as you said, it reflects the regional sort of consistency as opposed to trying to spot map every little parcel or every person's property to get it just right in that very granular scale. So thank you.
Yeah, and I gotta make a shout out there that all the thanks goes to our mapping planner, Nick Stark. That was a massive effort. And then also to correctly adjoin the right of ways to the corresponding future land use category. We had not done that. We had sort of advocated for a new right of way category, which we did not pursue, obviously. So that was, both of those were really big efforts. But I think, again, like you said, Alex, I think it makes a much cleaner, more accessible map that way.
This is Janet, and just also showing surface waters was also changed. And, but I just wanted to point out that we do have the hearing notice as an exhibit, and there's a link to the plan that Stephanie referred to that describes the changes.
Okay.
So it's not exactly in our exhibit list, but there is a link in a piece of the exhibit list. So for people who want to know, that is exhibit number 49.
What does the link bring you to?
To the plan, to the, just let me click it again.
It brings it to the project website, the plan website.
Oh, is that what it does?
I don't know.
Oh,
I'm just saying
yes.
that information
It's not there anymore?
there because.
Oh, okay. Well, it says draft plan report are available. Yeah, you're right. It's just the plan, the general plan page, Stephanie. So, but if it came with that, we could probably add it to our exhibit list.
Yeah,
so we'll find it and add it if it's not here. So, Brooke.
My question is about mapping, but it's also about community engagement, separate from goal 15. Part of our review focuses on that regional planning commissions shall solicit participation of each of their member municipalities and local citizens and other organizations. And you mentioned sort of morphing to the more parcel-based mapping. So I have a general question about whether, the entire parcel became the sort of default, but I wanted to ask you specifically about responding to two municipalities that one we had comments filed, and they're on our database from Pittsford, from a select board member indicating that it had to do with rural conservation. But the second question was about Danby and the select board's appearance and testimony or comments at your approval hearing for the regional plan, having to do with the Omnia parcel and being designated as a whole as the enterprise area, and their objection to that, and what was the response to that? Because I understand that the quarry itself is a fairly small area of that large parcel, and there were other uses that would have qualified for different designations for that large property.
Devin, this is Janet. I could share the
Sure.
share the map on screen for people in answer to this.
You're gonna use the online version.
I'll use our
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah.
our future land use map viewers.
So I'm glad you highlighted those two particular cases, Brooke, because I think those demonstrate quite clearly how when towns did engage in wanting to see changes to this map and provided sufficient context and evidence to sort of support that change, that we always tried to acquiesce. So in the case of Danby, it was quite clear that they were really worried about maintaining protections of the source protection area for their public water drinking, and then also to not convey to the quarry that, hey, this means you can blast off the entire back 40 hillside and expand that quarry indefinitely, because there were concerns about, of course, exemption stack 250 for those natural resources extractors. So in that case, we not only made changes to this particular parcel that also included mapping of the source protection area, but we mapped an additional source protection area that was north of this particular location in town. Danby was very active in communicating both landowners and the town government where they felt pain points in this mapping exercise. And outside of this particular case of the quarry, most of it revolved around that rural conservation category. So trying to bring that back in, and I think we struck a good balance with our mapping revision. And, we had heard directly from select board members from both Danby and Mount Tabor, who we often sort of work in parallel with. In the Pittsford case, both the concerns of the two select board members and their particular parcels were alleviated by our revision on our final draft. And they, again, were very involved in the process. They gave us very specific feedback over parcels that they would like to see reclassified where we could and felt it passed a straight face test. We did make those changes. And I think you'd find in a new conversation with those members that they're satisfied with the changes that we've made and the end result.
This is Janet. I'm just going to show the pre-application versus the application. So this is the adopted plan application map. and this is the pre.
Mhm.
So actually, let me zoom out a little bit. You can see how much more extensive that mapping was of the quarry property in the pre-application versus the application.
Yeah, and if you can see that sort of dark heart-shaped rural conservation right there, that was the source protection area, or that was of concern.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's hard to follow the bouncing ball to know whether the concerns are satisfied.
Yeah. Thank you, Brooke. I was going to ask this in a more general way because we had also provided some feedback as a board that the Omnia property up in Pittsford, that you had identified the entire property again as enterprise, and it looked like there was that some of that northernmost property abutted residential use. And it looks like you made that change there too.
Yeah.
So,
I can't remember the specifics of that original polygon, but
right.
yeah, I believe that was the change that was made.
Anything further? Okay. So we've discussed, I think we saw these enterprise sort of constrictions and a few like new small enterprise areas. But we also saw transition infill sort of bulge out a little bit. And I think that was partially in response to us suggesting that instead of having these strippy, skinny little things, why don't you look at whole parcels? And so you did some of that. Was there more on transition that you would like to highlight?
No,
in terms of changes?
I don't think so. I think we were really limited in scope at the pre-application phase to only a couple areas really in Rutland town and maybe Pittsford. And I think with our revisions, we found that there were more potential areas such as Pulteney, Fairhaven, Brandon, Mendon, and Killington. I think Brandon is a particularly good example where Brandon's updated map represents an expansion of the planned growth village center and just planned growth area. And, that was a revision that we did bring to you all, and that's at a separate LRB board meeting. And it was good feedback that you provided all of us for that particular infill area, that it truly does look so different from the areas surrounding it, and suggested that given that land use context and the constraints, that it would be better served as a infill area. And also, I think for the town, really highlights the fact that, hey, if you really want to connect these two village or the downtown with the village center, which is a planning effort that we just completed with the town through a scoping study, that there's more work that needs to happen here and understanding the sort of physical constraints of that particular area. So yeah, I think there was an expansion of infill development in very strategic key areas, but not overused. Because ideally, wherever possible, we wanted to give the towns the benefit of that planned growth area.
And I'll just show people what Brandon looked like before. That was the pre-application map, and this is the adopted plan map. So,
This Stephanie
yes.
jumping in, I would just point out that Brandon's transition infill area land use category may have changed, but overall for that land use category in our region, there was virtually no change.
I mean,
in
in
percent
total,
of the land
yeah,
area.
In total.
Yeah. I mean, it went down by a tiny fraction of a percentage, and I'm not even sure that wasn't related to just noise in the data.
Yeah, right,
right. So they're really between the pre-application, the first hearing map and the final hearing map, we really had very little shifts.
Yeah. So, can I get to more specifics now with focus on the growth future land use areas, as you call them. The growth FLUAs, or do you call it GFLUAs?
We call it the core four.
Okay, the core four. So you had depicted a downtown in Fairhaven, and now you're depicting that as village center. And can you talk about why?
Yeah, so the town, actually, this was a conversation with the town. So they are actually going through a formal step process of designating the downtown with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development now. So we do expect that this hopefully will shift to a downtown, but this was actually a discussion with them to try to keep it in line with what is current. So I think it represents more the local desire than necessarily something that we would have mapped on our own.
Okay.
And I think the town saw it as, hey, in effect, it's the same, but what they wouldn't have received would have been the step benefits from a downtown versus an established village center.
It's the same boundaries, I'll just point out. It's
Yes,
different.
same boundaries.
But you did constrict the other a little bit and expand the
Planned growth area.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, so there are some, a lot. So one of the items of feedback that we gave was, well, this is an example here, is the use of these village areas outside of planned growth areas and not, well, actually that one is connected to a center. So, well, like this area. And we're still feeling this out with other other regional planning commissions, but you did remap most of those and decided to go with an expanded planned growth area. And do you want to say any more about that?
Yeah, I think, obviously our sort of motivation and rationale behind making the change in the pre-application hearing was we saw it as these sort of concentric levels of density and sort of growth potential, with village area being the lowest and of course a downtown being the highest. And we just had that as a different interpretation from the LRRP at the end of the day. So when you guys made it clear that this was the preference, and then we're willing to entertain expansions to the planned growth area, we saw it as it's a trade-off. It had the same effect. And I think for our towns, that's all that they wanted to see at the end of the day, was as much expansion of the planned growth areas as possible. So I think we're generally able to cover those previously mapped village areas as planned growth where it was legitimate.
Yeah. Here's a quick question. Sudbury? You shrank the village center to just 2 parcels.
Correct.
You want to talk about that quickly?
Yeah, it's a long, arduous story behind that.
Okay. Well, we don't need the.
But I will give you. Yeah, it was by request of the town.
Okay.
Which actually included quite a bit of dialogue and even legal counsel from ACCD, because this has never actually happened in the history of Vermont, is a reduction of a designated village center.
Right.
But technically through this process, it could be done, whereas before there wasn't a process to do that.
Okay.
So this represents the will of the community based on where they're at now. And they really wanted to confine it to the municipally owned properties.
So those 2 are municipally owned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it still meets the definition of a very small village center. And I think it's very similar to what we have mapped in West Haven, and they're similar sized communities. So I think it's.
And West Haven did not have a legacy.
They did not.
And we actually encouraged you to increase it a little bit, and it looks like you did.
Yes. We did.
So thank you. And actually, it's good to point out that it sounds like ACCD staff are aware of this.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, so you've already explained Pittsford is currently no PGA or VA proposed because their plan expired and they're working on that. So we can expect to see you at some future date for
Correct. Yeah.
an amendment.
Same
And-
with Benson.
In Pollitt, you eliminated a village area. Is there any importance around that? Did Pollitt request you to do that?
Would you mind bringing that up just to
Sure.
give me a reference point?
Yeah, sorry.
Because it's West Pollitt and Pollitt Village.
Yeah, I think it's Pollitt Village that, sorry, this computer, I should have maybe used my own computer because this old board computer is slow. So yeah, it's the Pollitt Village. So this is the adopted plan, and I'll put on the pre-application.
Hmm.
You expanded the village center.
Yep.
And I don't think it's problematic. I just wondered if Pollitt asked you to do that, or if you were doing it and thinking that the village area just was too constricted to mean much, or
Exactly. Yeah, we heard you guys on sort of this linear lack of depth village area. So
Okay.
we tried to shrink it back and then expand the core. And for Pollitt, there's no public water or sewer in this particular area.
Mhm.
So one other factor that I may have been a source of change, but I honestly cannot remember, would have been soil suitable for septic. But generally speaking, I think, this makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
And it contains just the core.
Alex?
Yes, so still in the core four in terms of questions. On page 22 and 23 of our pre-application response, we asked for additional information regarding Rutland City and about whether redevelopment of industrial and auto-oriented areas will result in a cohesive traditional walkable mixed-use core, or whether they should be proposed as planned growth or transition infill areas instead. And Janet, I think I remember you actually being the board member who kind of called this out. So I guess I'm going to ask that question of you. Did you take a look at this and did feel like you had information you needed? Because I didn't see it. So
Thank you for asking, Alex. That's on my list. I was saving it for last because I thought it might be a little more hairy than some of these other ones, but maybe not. And in conjunction with that, I just want to point out that the change in the Rutland City mapping also takes or now it's all planned growth area, and the river corridor is not mapped as separate at all. So along with that, I want to ask for Rutland whether we can be assured that everything within that planned growth area qualifies as infill.
We took
because of that.
Parcel by parcel look at
Okay.
this and worked closely with Ed Bove in the city
Mhm.
planning department. So we're very confident in that level.
Okay.
So I do remember those comments, and I definitely remember we might have even had a follow-up conversation on this, but for us, Rutland City has all the components of complete streets that would support a planned growth area versus some other version. And it just feels like, despite some challenges that the city is working through and has even implemented really solid efforts like the road reconfiguration, and they've done a lot of planning, there are still transit routes, sidewalks, shared use paths along both corridors. So it felt disingenuous to map them any differently, especially since Rutland already has a pretty strong grid system And despite sort of, yeah, there are some sort of, it feels as though potential strippy type of development, there is tremendous density. So, I don't think, despite not loving maybe some of the elements within Rutland City, it still in our minds very much meets the definition of a planned growth area. And I don't think would necessitate differentiating those Main Street and North Main and Woodstock Avenue corridors as any differently from what they are now. So yeah, I think they have all the components necessary.
And so this is Janet. Alex, your question was for me, and I think the answer is yes. They answered my concerns. We had a lot of feedback on what was proposed for Killington. Oops. And the map that is proposed for Killington now is quite different and reflects at least what we were, it reflects some of the feedback that we gave, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how you approach remapping Killington. I'm sorry, this computer is very
Yeah, this was one of the more challenging towns to map. And because at the end of the day, Killington has undertaken more planning and development than any other community in our region. And we really tried our best to extend that benefit to those that have done the planning. Unfortunately, what we struggled to get around is that sort of linear nature of Killington Road. However, it took a lot for us to not still map that as a planned growth area all the way up through for multiple reasons. The fact that they're investing $25 million into Killington Road to make it multimodal, have a shared use path all the way up through, transit service. They cannot help the fact that they have physical constraints on both sides of the road that just create a linear development pattern. There's no way around that. So it was a challenge. Ultimately, the town really wanted this tier 1B or 1A benefit to be secured and not potentially jeopardize their tier 1B or 1A aspirations. So we did remove it. I know, obviously, Great Gulf, the developers of the Six Peak Village at the top of Killington Road, very much wanted it to be eligible for tier 1A. But again, at the end of the day, for us, defining that as a village center, and Alex, I remember your comments sort of in that early versions, like where are the sort of mixed use civic assets that we traditionally would see, and they do not exist. I know Great Gulf and the developers really tried to make a case, and I think they did their very best to do that. But I think where we landed is where the town is comfortable, where I think the statute defines it well. I do think there could be a case made for a special circumstance where Killington Road is planned growth without additional village centers in the center or at the top. But again, I know that would be a deviation from sort of traditional thinking around how this mapping is done on a more localized sort of centric model versus linear. So yeah, tricky one, really tricky.
And just so people have a frame of reference, I will show the pre-app. That was a proposed village center for Killington in the pre-application. And this is the final. So 2 nodes of transition infill in place of the linear extension of village center.
Yeah. So who knows, maybe when they complete their RAISE grant work, we may come back with a revision, but right now that's where we landed with the town.
I'll note that, you did constrict or make, take away the southerly extension of the planned growth area in Wallingford, or was it village area? Village area.
Yep. The Timber Hill Estates.
Yeah.
That was a request from the land use review board as well for consideration.
Yeah, and was the town okay with that?
I mean, they were fairly indifferent. I think,
Oh, they were.
of course, they would like to see any expansion where possible, but ultimately Wallingford did not opt into tier 1.
Right.
So it was kind of inconsequential.
Okay. So, was for Brandon. We already talked about Brandon. So Fairhaven did adopt their subdivision regulations late last year, right?
Yep.
And then
or early this year.
One or the other. I checked at the end of the year and I couldn't tell whether they had.
Yes, we did receive confirmation that they have.
And Benson is no longer proposing village area.
Due to the town plan expiration.
Okay.
There were.
Do you think they'll, and did you say you thought they would come back?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have expressed interest.
Okay. So one of the questions or one of the requested revisions was to discuss strategies to transform your transition infill. You feel like you gave that any more attention in this adopted plan versus the pre-app?
That is a good question. I honestly don't have a solid answer for you there. I know we talk about transition infill, and I want to say there was a small revision after the pre-application.
This is Janet. I know that Stephanie said that the amount didn't change, even though the configurations changed a little bit, but.
Yeah, and this is Stephanie. I should probably caveat that I was talking about between our first public hearing and our final public hearing.
Okay, I see.
We didn't really track the way you're walking us through this.
Yeah, I think we did add a couple statements here now that I remember. Page 67, paragraph 2, 3, and 4, where we discuss some sort of strategies to help transition formerly auto-dominated corridors into the mixed-use environments.
Okay.
But again, trying to not isolate this particular issue into sort of one plan chapter when it really covers housing, land use, transportation, many sectors. So I think it's discussed in those other chapters in other ways as well.
Yeah. Board members, I was going to move on to tier 1B, unless you have questions of the commission on the future land use map in general. Nope.
I don't have any remaining questions, but if you're not looking at the map or having us look at it, maybe you could stop the share.
Well, I might show one more map. I'll just show the tier 1B before and after. And so let's turn off FLU. Okay, so in the pre-application, we looked at 7 or no more.
Yeah.
We looked at a whole bunch of towns for tier 1B, and in the final application, we're just looking at 7. So I just wanted I should turn off all these other regions so that maybe that's why this is so slow. Yeah, this is being. Okay, so here's the pre-app in blue. No, this computer has decided not to respond anymore. Oh, there we go. No.
Then I think you need to turn on the Rutland Regional PC layer.
Oh, did I accidentally turn that off? Okay, that's the problem.
There we
Thank
go.
you, Alex, for paying so much attention from afar. So here's what you had proposed initially for tier 1B and in the blue there. And here is what is being proposed now in just the yellow. 7 towns and not as extensive. Pittsburgh not included. Oh wait, Brandon is included though.
Mhm.
Okay. So in general, it's because some of them aren't eligible anymore, but it seems like some maybe just opted out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then Mendon was not included in the pre-app, but it is here. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Mendon was just an oversight in the pre-app. We
Okay.
didn't think they were eligible, but they are. So
Okay.
we're like, okay, Mendon's
Okay, I
Mendon's an
just
add-on.
wanted to confirm that.
Yep.
All right. Any questions from board members about tier 1A or I'm sorry, tier 1B? Sarah? Looks like you may have one. No?
I do not.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna stop sharing then.
I don't have any
Um,
questions about tier 1B either. I don't have any other questions, period. All mine have been asked and answered. Thanks.
Okay. Brooke, do you have any questions?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Appreciate Devin's response.
Sarah?
I believe that you have covered them all. Thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to open it up to, is Faith still here? Maybe not. From AOT? Looks like she might not be. Okay, so I'd like to just open it up to questions from people in the room or online in general, or comments. And if you could state your name.
Larry Purcell, again, I'm the commissioner from representing Mendon on the RRPC. This is my 26th year here. I've gone through several rewrites of the regional plan. This particular plan, our executive finance committee put well over 100 hours into it. We didn't work on the future land use map, just on the regional plan. For years, RPCs and Rutland RPC was kind of working in the background behind the scenes and was kind of the best kept secret. That's changed over the years. We're now in the forefront. People realize who we are. It's sometimes I explain I'm on the Rutland Regional Planning Commission and they have no clue what that is. That's changed recently. They really know who we are. So having worked on several of these regional plans and the rewrites, this particular plan, we reached out, for the staff did, more so than I've ever seen in the past. They attended to every municipality, every select board. There's numerous opportunities for anyone to get involved in this plan. So the reach out was incredible compared to previous years. So it's just an incredible product. I'm really proud to be part of the Rutland Regional Plan, and that's why I've been here over a quarter of a century, and hopefully I can hang out a little bit longer. So, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any other comments from in the room? Brad online, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to thank the you know, the various groups that have been involved in this. There's a lot of data getting crunched here. Maybe this isn't the place to talk about it, but Tier 1B, the S325 changed some of the criteria around 3.1B, broadening it and making it more flexible, I think, in terms of when you can jump in and take advantage of it. Is that correct?
Brad,
guys-
this is Janet. It's not correct. What it did is it allowed for Tier 1B applications to come to the board without having to go through the pre-application process. So they can
Okay.
come, instead of having that 60-day pre-application for a separate Tier 1B request, now you can just come to the board directly for the Tier 1B request. So it didn't change the criteria that need to be met by the municipality or the areas that are eligible. It just changed the process.
Okay. Yep. So, you know, I guess I think maybe I'm talking out of turn, but I think Castleton opted out because there were things that they didn't like in Act 181. But I think that it's probably, and maybe you guys can just make a proposal or shed some light on the advantages quickly of participating in T1B. I think it's you know, opting out means the town doesn't want benefits that help connect T1B to T1A areas. But you know, if that's a protest vote, that's one thing. But I think it's probably, if that's the only reason, then I think it's probably not a good reason to opt out. Would you advise that?
So Brad, this is Janet again. So what Tier 1B gives to the municipality or to developers basically is Act 250 exemptions for housing projects within the Tier 1B area. The state designation program or the state community investment program that provides designation benefits for for municipal downtowns, village centers, village areas, and these planned growth areas, that's different. And those would still be available whether a municipality opted in or not. If they have those particular future land use areas mapped within their towns on the regional future land use map, they are still eligible for those community investment program benefits, whether they opt into Tier 1B or not.
So sorry, I guess what's the advantage or disadvantage to Tier 1B? I don't follow.
It provides Act 250 exemptions for proposed housing projects of up to 50 units.
That's
So
it,
developers,
just housing.
yeah, just housing.
Or mixed use.
Or mixed use, yeah,
Housing.
it has to be a project that involves housing. And it gives an exemption for those projects that have up to 50 units of housing. So a project with 51 units would not be exempt. It would still need the Act 250 permit.
Okay, thank you for that.
But a 50 unit would get an exemption from needing an Act 250 permit. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. And just I have two other things to just raise. You know, I know feedback was given along the way, and you know, a lot of what the Regional Planning Commission is trying to implement is what's been passed down to them from the state level, and the state level is really driving this agenda on how things should work, and it's rather rigid, so they don't have a lot of leeway. But there were like 5 key areas that were raised, and I'm sure other towns and people raised these things as well, having to do with like the economic impact and tax-based stability, property rights and rural character, environmental protection, and Tier 3 mapping is problematic. Housing density and community centers that has issues. Local government, public awareness has issues. You know, there are a lot of issues in all these areas. So I just want to go on record that there are concerns by people out there in a lot of different areas, and this thing just seems to keep rolling forward. Even you know, I was glad to see the S325, the Senate bill, went through and put a hold on some of this stuff. But there's some really very real concerns on how this stuff is all going to work and what the real impact is going to be.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And then my last
Thank you.
item was,
Yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead, Brad.
My last item was I had gone through the mapping tool, and I had flagged that there were like three, this is for Castleton, there were three peculiarities in that mapping. I sent this to Devin. I don't know if anybody ever really looked at it or dismissed it or whatnot. I never got an explanation back. You know, there were these are specific things. I can read them off to you. There's only three of them, or I can forward them to you, or if Devin is able to provide an update on those, that's fine as well. I just wanted to highlight that there were a couple oddities in the mapping.
Thank you, Brad. This is Janet. Devin, do you recall what Brad is, would you like Brad to list his three oddities, mapping discrepancies, or?
Yeah, I want to say these were before our final revision. This was between the first public hearing draft and the final draft. And I want to say many of these were addressed in that could have been addressed. And these were about the interplay between rural conservation, rural general, and resource-based recreation along Crystal Heights, Haven, or Little Rutland Road.
Does that ring a bell, Brad?
Yep, it was Crystal Heights.
Yeah.
And it was about resource-based recreational changing to rural general. And then there was one lakeshore property that was listed as resource-based recreational, went to rural general, which I thought all shoreline property had to be resource-based recreational.
Yeah, they certainly don't have to be. However, I think you would find on the new map that unless
If you corrected it, that's fine. I was just trying to make sure that we had the best correct coding going forward. I can go back and try to take a look.
Yeah, so I think you'll find that those were changed, and where you may see an alteration that wasn't viewed before would be a small bit of rural conservation within the rural general category, which demonstrates the presence of, class 2 wetland, or some feature that was identified in our short list of requiring a rural conservation change. So like the wetlands, I can't remember, there are a few other.
I don't think I had any wetlands
But in the conserved lands database,
Yeah, exactly.
we skinnied it up a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate your participation. Thank you. This is Janet, by the way. Brooke.
I was having trouble hearing Brad, and I wanted to be sure that whatever he would like us to consider or to hear is effectively conveyed today, because this is a hearing. So if he's satisfied with his conversation with Devin about this, that's fine. But if there's any question, because I cannot discern what the two of them are talking about. I don't think it's been adequately identified on the record. So for clarity, if Brad had concerns and wants to make sure that they've been addressed, I would ask that they be repeated if he so desires.
Brad, this is Janet.
Thank you, Brooke. It seems like the best use of time, because it's something that's difficult to do, is when I go back and try to check on the map and see if Devin seems to indicate that that those things were kind of cleaned up. So I'll take a look. If there's still an issue, I'll come back to either Devin or to you, Janet.
No, so that what Brooke is trying to say is this is the hearing, and we will very likely meet in a little bit and decide to close the hearing.
Yeah.
Unless we feel that there is additional information that we need as a board to make a decision on this application. And I'm anticipating that we won't have a need for additional information. So what Brooke is saying is, if you want us to consider this,
now or never.
yeah,
Right.
basically. So I
Never-
can actually show the map on the screen again, and you and Devin can have that same conversation while I show the area on the screen that you're talking about. Would that make sense?
Sure, if you want.
Okay.
He did
Yeah,
indicate that they made changes though, so I'm
So
trusting that
Janet, this is Alex. Just a suggestion, if we're going to do this exercise, I would prefer it if Brad could just speak to the 3 areas that he had concerns with without a back and forth with Devin. Just allow
Okay.
Brad to get that out
Yes.
and on the record.
Yeah.
And then if Devin wants to respond, fine. But it's very hard to follow the conversation when there's interruptions and back and forth conversation.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you, Alex. This is Janet. So what town are we?
this is
We're
Castleton.
talking about Castleton. Okay. And
Yeah.
where in Castleton? Along the lake?
Probably the
Okay.
easiest one is along the east shore.
The east shore of the lake. Okay,
Yeah,
so hold on
about-
just a moment while the information loads. If I turn off the parcels, that might also help.
Janet, you still need to turn on the FLU areas under the application.
So this is the application. So this is the adopted plan map. And this shows
Okay.
the lake,
Yeah, if you-
surrounded by some, resource-based recreation in the light green. And
So
then
there's-
some rural general and a little spot of rural conservation here.
So if you,
Is this the-
yep, if you zoom in more,
Okay,
I would, based on my conversation with him, I wasn't expecting to see any rural general along the lake shore. And if you scroll.
right
up
here,
maybe.
there is some right along the lake shore, right
No,
here.
It's higher up than that, as I recall.
Oh, okay, I saw some of that too, yeah. So here.
It was below Crystal Beach, but above the golf course, I believe. So you're going too far. Yeah.
I'm in Hubbard. Yep.
Too far north.
So I don't see it. On the east side of the lake,
Yeah, you have to go down from where you are right now.
okay.
You're above Crystal Beach there.
Yeah, I don't know where Crystal Beach is, so.
Oh, it's right where that green arm reaches in to the left.
This,
Nope, go down
this,
further. Yeah, that's Crystal Beach area, I believe, right there. So
oh, okay,
go down along that shoreline. You can zoom in, you'll probably find that there's one property that sticks out. In the old map, it stuck out a lot because it was a bright yellow. Might have
let
to
me turn
zoom
on
in
the old
more.
map.
Yeah, I think he's referring to the first public hearing map, not the pre-application.
Okay. Okay, so it's not the pre-application map, it's the first public hearing map. And this is but this, where my cursor is, Brad, is that where you're talking about? Somewhere in here?
The property was along the shoreline, so it would along Route 30. So yeah, follow your cursor down along the shoreline in that. From there down to the Oxford Green, in that area, there was a property that was stood out.
And
as a rural
Janet,
general.
please turn the pre-application off. These are semi-transparent layers, so it's still showing somewhat. Thank you.
Yeah, I see all resource-based recreation between this river
Can you just
corridor sort of.
zoom in the area just below where it says Castleton on the east shore? Yeah, in there.
Yeah, I don't see
And
any
then-
yellow.
And then could you drag it so we go up that shoreline? Okay, and that and maybe
Oh,
down.
that little sliver?
No, that's not it.
Yeah.
It was a house on the shoreline.
It must not be there
But
anymore,
it must be
Brad.
gone now. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that what you were looking for it to be gone?
Well, I didn't think I thought it should not have changed from resource-based recreation to rural general.
Okay,
Everybody else along there is a resource-based recreational, right? So it
Right.
shouldn't be rural general.
right. And it appears now that it is all resource-based recreation.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then the other issue was kind of, if you pull the screen down a little bit to go up. No, sorry, you want to go the other direction.
you want me to go
So you
north?
move up on the map, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so are you able to identify like the Crystal Heights area, which I think is right above where your cursor is but inland a little bit? Yeah, right about there. That's right above your cursor is where North Road is, and then that's the area. Go up in there. And I noticed that there were like 6 properties up in Crystal Heights that changed from resource-based recreational to rural general. And based on comments when I was talking to Devin, I thought one could argue that without the lake, these homes would not exist. And I noted that some of these homes in this area have dock spaces granted to them on the lake, so I didn't think they could be rural general. I don't know if you can look at the before and after for those. What color is rural general? The cream color?
Rural general is yellow and the light green is the resource-based recreation. And
Yeah.
this was what was presented to us last year, and this is what is presented to us now. It's a little bit different. But if these are the homes you're speaking about here, they were in rural general before, and
It would have been on the west side of that road that goes straight up.
up
So,
here.
yeah, in that area.
Uh-huh.
Yep. There was
Okay.
6 properties.
Okay, let's see.
And
It's pretty similar. So not changed. And, I think this is something that it sounds like you can continue to work with Devin and his staff on. There is no regulatory effect between whether it's classified on this map as rural general or resource-based recreation, but if you feel strongly about these 2 categories and want to work with the Regional Planning Commission staff to remap that at some future point, it's certainly something that could happen.
nope, that's even better if you can confirm that there's no consequence for the coding of it.
Yeah,
Other than just being consistent and
Yeah,
correct
yeah.
in how things are done.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And I think it's just important to know, Brad, that a lot of these lie on the margins, and it's really kind of a best judgment call as to where we break off a resource-based rec and convert to rural general. There's no hard and fast sort of like, hey, it's a 100-foot buffer from the lake. It's going to capture all these homes. I think it's sort of the best guess scenario based on these pieces. But when you're working with tens of thousands of parcels over a county, it's challenging.
I agree. Yeah, I said at the up front, I think, this is a Herculean task to go through and review all this stuff. It's very difficult. So thank you for all your hard work on this. It's not easy. I know.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Okay, Annette.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Brad.
Hello, I'm Annette Smith from Danby. I want to compliment the Regional Planning Commission for the work that you've done on this. As a former commissioner, I appreciate that there was a relatively short time span in which you had to get a new plan adopted. And so this was especially a challenge to do. I also want to acknowledge that there were some challenges in relating to towns like Danby, where I live. And um, I want to acknowledge and thank you for responding to the input that you received and addressing it. So just give you a attaboy, as we used to say, for that was Fred, for getting it done and doing such a good job with it. So thank you.
Thanks, Annette.
Thank you, Annette. Any other comments or questions? So this is Janet. Can I ask board members whether you feel the need for a closed deliberative session to decide whether to close the hearing, or whether you feel that we can make that decision quickly without a deliberative session? Sarah?
I do not feel the need for any supplemental information at this point and would be okay with closing the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with Sarah.
And so do I. Janet agrees. Alex?
Well, to your first question, I don't think we need a closed session to decide whether we have enough
Right.
information. It sounds like 3 out of 4 of us feel like we do. Yeah, I generally agree. I think we have what we need to rule on this. So yeah, good
Okay.
to close the hearing.
Okay, Sarah?
I would like to move to close the hearing and enter a deliberative session.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Brooke. Any further discussion? So all those in favor of closing the hearing on the Rutland Regional Plan as adopted, please, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That was all 4 board members in the affirmative. So this hearing is closed, and thank you everybody for participating. And again, as Annette said, as others have said, you guys did a really Herculean task here, and I think it shows well.
Well, thank you to you and the rest of the Land Use Review Board. You guys have been excellent partners. I know we've had some bumps along this paving this road, but I feel like we've landed in a really good space, and you've helped us produce a better plan as a result. So thank you for that partnership. And it's always felt like we've been working together to get to yes, not to find extraneous roadblocks, and really just work to make this work. So thank you.
So I just want to explain that we will now go into a deliberative phase until we have a final determination in writing. We will need to go through this point by point and make findings. So we have 15 days to do that. So that would bring us to the 30th, which is a Friday, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. We may try to get, if possible, we may try to get it out before that. So just to let you know.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments, questions, or anything from anybody? Okay.
Great job on the timing. Wow.
Bad, 3:09. Not bad. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. Bye, Kate. Thanks for coming.
He's,
Take care,
I
guys.
don't think he's gonna get back to you.
You ready to close this?
Yeah.
We're seeing though.
We aren't doing a deliberative session today, are we? We're not sticking around for that.
It wasn't clear to me whether we
Yeah.
were or we weren't. Didn't your motion say something about entering a deliberative session?
And we do
Made
have
me
one
think we
scheduled
were.
for Monday,
Your fault.
but
Hey, should I stop the recording?
yes.
Yes.
You
Thank
should.
you.